Hello my friends and welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to share with you the main guiding principles for evaluating structural models. So as you can see, this is our example. We have four measurement models in this past model. Three of them are reflective measurement models and one of them is a formative measurement model. We have also introduced age as a control variable, and as you can see, this control variable is connected to both job satisfaction and work motivation. And we have two mediating hypotheses. So the first mediating hypothesis is about the impact of communication skills on work motivation through job satisfaction. And the second mediating hypothesis is about the impact of creating value on work motivation through job satisfaction. So because all of the direct effects between the latent variables in our model are positive effects, so that's why you would see that the two mediating hypotheses are directional hypotheses. And in order to test these directional hypotheses, basically we just need to run a one-tailed bootstrapping test. And I will give you more details about this in the next slide. And the third hypothesis in our example is a multi-group hypothesis, which is basically about the impact of gender on the entire model. And because we have no idea about gender differences in terms of our model, that's why H3 will be a non-directional hypothesis. Okay, and in this slide you would see the steps that we need to take in terms of doing a structural model evaluation, and basically these are the steps that have been highlighted in our recent article that is accessible through this link as well. So the first step is about assessing the collinearity among the predictor variables, and what you need to do is to focus on the VIF values of the exogenous variables in your model. So when the VIF values are less than 5 or ideally less than 3, it means that there is no problem with respect to collinearity among the predictor variables in your model. Number 2 is about the assessment of significance and relevance of past coefficients, and basically to assess the significance of the past coefficients and also to do the hypothesis testing, you have to consider a percentile bootstrapping test, and with respect to the evaluation of the relevance of past coefficients, you have to focus on the size of the past coefficients. And also note that you are allowed to run a one-tailed bootstrapping test when there is evidence for the positive or negative relationships between the variables in your model, and as long as you have no idea about the direction of the relationship between the variables based on previous research findings, you have to run a two-tailed test. And step number 3 is about assessing the models in sample predictive power, and to do so you have to focus on the R-square values of the endogenous constructs in your model. So these are the thresholds that you need to consider. Values of 0.75 for the R-square values of the endogenous constructs in your model indicate a substantial in sample predictive power. Values of 0.50 indicate a moderate in sample predictive power, and the values of 0.25 indicate a weak in sample predictive power. Also note that R-square values above 0.9 are not desirable because they are usually indicative of undesirable overfit. Okay, and step number 4 is about the assessment of F-square effect sizes, and what you are going to do here is to assess the impact of the exogenous constructs on the R-square values of the endogenous constructs in your model. So these are the threshold values that you need to consider in order to determine the size of the effect of the exogenous construct on the R-square values. And sometimes you have interaction or quadratic terms in your past model, and if this is the case, you need to consider these thresholds in order to determine the size of the effect of these interaction or quadratic terms on the R-square values of endogenous constructs. Alright, and now step number 5 is about the assessment of exogenous constructs' unique contribution to the R-square values, and basically this is something that you have to do it manually, and I will show you how it can be done. Then we have step number 6, which is about the assessment of models out of sample predictive performance, and to do so you have to run a PLS predict analysis. And then we have step number 7, which is model comparison based on BIC and GM criteria. Note that the BIC statistics are automatically generated in the output of a Smart PLS, but for GM, you have to download an Excel file from this address and then compute the GM statistics. Note that I will show you how model comparison can be done based on BIC and GM criteria, but not based on our example. I will do this based on one of the projects that is available in a Smart PLS. And then we have step number 8, which is basically about running a permutation based multigroup analysis. You know that we have one multigroup hypothesis, which is H3, and we are going to test the impact of gender on the entire PLS model. That's why I'm going to demonstrate how a permutation based multigroup analysis is done in a Smart PLS. And finally, we have step number 9, which is basically about performing a structural model robustness checks. We have different types of robustness checks, and in episode 10, I'm going to show you how you can evaluate nonlinear relationships in your model. Another point that I need to highlight is that since we have introduced age as a control variable in our model, basically we have addressed the issue of indigeneity in our analysis. So these are all the steps that we need to consider, and in the next part of episode 8, which is part 2, I'm going to focus on step 1 to step 5. Then in part 3 of episode 8, I'm going to focus on step 6, and in part 4 of episode 8, I'm going to focus on model comparison. And also with respect to testing our third hypothesis, which is a multigroup hypothesis, we will have part 1 and part 2 of episode 9, and finally in episode 10, I'm going to show you how to evaluate nonlinear relationships in a PLS model. Alright, thank you very much, and I hope this has been of some use, and thank you very much for watching.